Thanks everyone for joining us today. We have Wade Cantrell of Cantrell's Information Technologies here to talk about cybersecurity. He's actually our neighbor, so he's right around the corner from us. So if you ever need him, you know where to go. But this workshop is going to provide business owners and organizations a framework to help them recognize and plan how to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from a cyber attack. Everyone on this call will receive the information you need to recognize the current threats and inherent risks of cybercrime to your businesses and organizations, and take away useful tools to reduce the residual risk of cybercrime for your organization. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wade. He can introduce himself, and then we do have another speaker that he'll be introducing as well. So Wade, do you want to go ahead and take it away?
Yes, again, thank you very much, Melissa. And let me go ahead and see if, do you see introductions there, Melissa?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So thanks again very much for the Concord Chamber of Commerce, especially Melissa, who is the Director of Operations and Marketing. And she is a very good Zoom meeting facilitator, and this could not have happened without her. So thank you very much, Melissa. Also joining us will be Detective Darren Billington. He is with the Concord Police Department, and more focused on what we're doing today, he is also with the U.S. Secret Service Cyber Fraud Task Force and the Silicon Valley Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. He will be sitting in on this meeting, and he does possibly have, could be called out if there's some emergency. Hopefully he'll be able to stick with us and contribute as we go. So again, everybody, thank you very much for attending. A little bit of housekeeping is that this webinar or workshop is being recorded, and this will be indeed available to you. Also, there will be documents and links that we will provide afterwards, so that you don't have to be furiously trying to write down notes on what we're talking about here. What I would like to say, though, is I do think it'd be a good idea to have pen and paper, or some document, electronic document open, to take notes that would be unique for your business, either reminders or things that you may want to think about after this workshop. Because again, this is a working workshop. My goal is to provide you information that you can then take away and use to help your business form a better shield against cybercrime. And one of the things I do want to mention here is that I hope I don't slip up. I am trying to refrain from using best practices, because as things evolve so quickly, I'd rather use better practices. So just to let you know, if I say best practices, just think about better practices, because again, things are evolving all the time and things are changing. Okay, so the first, we're going to start off with a poll. And Melissa, if you can put the poll out for everyone. Take a minute to look at that, and please respond. In the meantime, while you're doing that, here is a tip that I'd like for you to consider. Think of a cyber attack similar to an earthquake. We know it's going to happen. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen 10 years from now. It may not happen in your lifetime, but it will happen. The idea is to be prepared so that when it does happen, you have the procedures in place to respond to it very quickly and in an organized manner, and be able to get back up and running quickly. So looks like we have about a good split. There's some people that are not very confident with their ability against a cyber attack. Some are somewhat unsure. So let's go ahead, and with that information, let's continue. So one of the things I would like to share is why I'm doing this workshop. Number one, I've been doing it for a while, been doing it since 2017. This is a different workshop. I've been doing cybersecurity workshops since 2017. And I'm on a mission to really educate the public and my clients against the real risks of cybercrime, and also to help them with defense strategies. Some defense strategies, as you will see, is not technical and can be done internally with minimum spent cost or spending, maybe time, but not spend, and is definitely worthwhile. Also, as a business owner, I certainly recognize that cybercrime, being a victim of a cybercrime is really a drag on your business, can stop the forward momentum of a business. And also it's can be very costly. And the third reason is simply, I think cyber criminals, although I respect them because they are very good at what they do, I think they are bullies, and I just want to stop them so that they have a bad day. So a little bit of cybercrime statistics. I was fortunate enough to sit in on a couple sessions at ChannelCon, which is a workshop / trade show for IT professionals. And one of their speakers was Teresa Payton, and she is, at the time, was the first woman to be part of the task force at the White House against cybercrime. And she had a lot of interesting things to say. These are some of the interesting things that she had to say. One is that it's worth noting that a business is hit with ransomware every 11 seconds. 94% of all malware still comes through the email. Hacking kits used to launch cyber attacks are now on the black market, and they can be purchased for as little as $1. And then also the global cost of ransomware damage is expected to reach $20 billion this year, 57 times more than 2015. To put that in perspective, one of the fastest growing companies that I think all of us are aware of is Amazon. In that same period of time, Amazon, from 2015 to 2020, Amazon grew 3 times in revenue. This grew 57 times in that same period of time. So let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity myths and misconceptions. Some of you probably already know this, but it's worth repeating. Some misconception is that small businesses are too small to be a target. And while we are small and we aren't necessarily being specifically attacked, we get swept up in a volume-based attack. It's a numbers game with these cyber criminals, and they create a huge volumes of attacks. They just send out millions of emails and are constantly working to find different ways to attack us. So we are not, as small businesses, necessarily being uniquely targeted. We'll initially be part of a volume-based attack, but then once they do find a soft spot, then they will target us, and then they will become more focused, and we can be a victim of a more concentrated attack. Also, just to share with you, the cyber criminals are starting to focus more and more on small businesses because we are relatively underprotected compared to large enterprises. They have developed and are using a lot more shield items for their security. So another myth is that a breach will not affect you much, that you can quickly pick up the pieces after an incident happens. Here's a few things to recognize. When a company or nonprofit gets hit with a data breach or a cyber attack or ransomware, it is absolute chaos. And not only is the business dealing with the effects of the cyber attack, they're also trying to determine how to stay in business, how to continue to respond to customers, and just there's a lot of different moving parts. Including if you need to, there's breach reporting requirements if you're under certain jurisdictions and reporting requirements. You also have the risk of bad publicity, losing reputation, possibly losing customers because you're unable to serve them, or your reputation has been damaged enough that they go elsewhere. Also, your valuable files can be lost and or exposed. One of the latest techniques that cyber criminals are using nowadays is that they're using shaming techniques of where they are not only preventing you from getting to your data through ransomware, prior to actually starting the ransomware, they have taken your data, stolen it, and are threatening to expose it and put it out in the public unless you pay them the ransom. Therefore, right now, actually a couple of years ago, ransomware, the percentage that was getting paid out was diminishing until the cyber criminals are now using this shaming technique. And now over 90% of ransomware is getting paid, according to some of the reports I've seen recently. You also have extended downtime. One thing to be aware of is, let's say you do have your data encrypted by ransomware, and you do end up paying, and you happen to get a decryption key back from the attacker. The time for decryption is very slow compared to the time of encryption. Therefore, even if everything works out to the point of where you do pay the ransom and you get the proper key, it can take days, if not longer, to maybe even weeks to get all your data back. Many of you may be aware there was a cyber attack that was successful against the Contra Costa County library system. I know it was at least 14 days until any of their services actually started coming back of any different degree. That was because of the damage and that was caused by the attack itself. And finally, just to share with you, paying the ransom is not guaranteed that you're actually going to get your data back. For example, what I mentioned a little bit earlier, that these ransomware kits can be purchased for as little as $1. What that tells me, and is true, is the fact that there are a number of people out there deploying ransomware kits that are very unsophisticated. And there are times where the attack is so chaotic and the person that's doing the ransomware doesn't know what they're doing, that you may pay the ransom and yet they are unable to get your data back for you because they simply don't have the technology.
Hey, Wade,
okay.
Hey, Wade, real quick. I think Darren was trying to speak.
Okay, good. This is a perfect time for him to start talking about it, because he may have some examples of cyber attacks, plus he may have some other things. So go ahead, please.
Can you hear me right now, Wade?
Certainly, yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say a lot of that stuff is very good, what you said. And the biggest thing I would say to that is a lot of stuff we get is small businesses. And I can tell you right now, it's not often it's a big business, but it's usually the small businesses. And I was actually the first guy out there when the library got hacked. So I can actually tell you guys about how that went, and tell you from kind of how the process was and whatnot, because that's an interesting one. And maybe in the question and answer section, I can talk more about that. But so real examples. Did you have anything, Wade, you're going to talk about before I give some real examples?
Go ahead and go. This is your time. And if you want to talk a little bit about the library, that would be great. And we can do more later. But if you want to pick a couple of examples that you've seen.
So I've gone out to incidents throughout the Bay Area for Secret Service or Homeland Security. I'm on a couple task forces, and being on those, they'll call me to go out and respond with an agent of theirs to notify business that, hey, we think you've been hacked. Your cards are being sold on the dark web, your credit cards, among other things. So with that said, if in the Q&A section, maybe I'll talk to you guys more about that, but there's a certain thing that we look for when we come out to you. But let me talk about the library first, because it's a good example. When I got the call from the county and Secret Service, the DA's office actually asked me if I could come out there to help them. All their servers had been taken over, basically, by ransomware. And it was basically, not giving away too much here because of poor password management, which I'm sure Wade will talk to you guys about later. And when you get out there as law enforcement, our goal is to try to get evidence that we can relay back to our federal partners in trying to figure out who did it and if we can do anything about it or trace them back and stuff. The library is a good example because as law enforcement, we actually got there first to collect the data before Microsoft came out and did their thing with the library afterwards. So as a small business, when we come out as law enforcement, you have a choice. Who you want to call? Do you want to go straight to the private sector or do you want to call law enforcement? It's really going to depend upon your need. In this case, the library being a county entity called law enforcement. So we went out there, and Microsoft, because they had a contract, also went out there after us. Our goal as law enforcement is to try and get the evidence to try to track these people back. Microsoft's goal is to try to get the library back in business, which is what Wade was talking about. And when it comes to ransomware, sometimes we can actually get those decryption keys on the dark web or among public forums from other cybersecurity experts. Lately, they're getting really good about it, but I can talk more about the library later. Another good example was a ransomware actually in this area, a local dentist office. And that one, again, they had backups going on, but they had their backups connected to the computer that also got encrypted. So they encrypted the backups as well. So one thing to take away from that is if you're going to do backups, and I'm sure Wade will talk about this later, but don't have your backups on site or connected to the computers all the time, because when these hackers get into your system, they're going to encrypt everything they can, including the external drives that are backing up. In that case, the dentist office decided to hire, after we went in and got our evidence, they decided to pay the ransom, and the library did not, and they lost, from what I recall, most of everything. The dentist decided to pay the ransom, which is law enforcement we never recommend, but coming from a private angle, I could see why you pay the ransom sometimes. But from law enforcement, we always recommend against it, because if everyone pays the ransom, and Wade put out a good statistic there, 90% of the people are paying the ransom, then these guys are going to keep doing it because they know they're going to get paid. But you run the risk of they may not decrypt your files if that happens. So in this case, the dentist office did get all their files back and decrypted, and they had a private firm come out to assist them with all that. Another example of a cyberattack was a local business here who was taking credit cards, and we found out those credit cards were being sold on the dark web. So as law enforcement, we will try to go out to a small business like yourself, and we will alert you to that. And then you have several options after that. You can choose to use us to collect evidence and see if we can trace back via the means that we use who did it, or you can go straight to the private sector and not give us, say, consent to get the data we need to look at stuff. There's really, if you told us to come to your, if we come out to your business, you could tell us a pound sand, basically, and that's the bottom line. We don't like that, of course, because we want to try to catch the bad guys, but you've also got the right to tell us, you know, I appreciate you notifying us, but we're not going to let you have access to our systems. We've actually had that happen before, and that's totally your guys' right. If that does happen, you can go straight to like a cybersecurity firm in the private sector, like Mandiant, FireEye, Crypsys, Palo Alto Networks. A whole bunch of private sector companies can come out and help you get your business back on track too. But as far as real life examples, I think that was 3 good ones, and I didn't want to take up too much of the time there, Wade. I could go into detail for a long time, but I think for examples, is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, perfect. And let me share with you, this is a good time to make a point. mean, I own an IT company, and there are a lot of companies like me. And there's a few companies like FireEye, for example, that was just mentioned, which are more or have at least divisions that are forensic specialists. These are folks who are trained to go in and actually figure out how it happened, what data was taken. And a lot of times that can be important if there is a penalty associated with the breach. Let's say if it was HIPAA or something like that, there can be a state penalty on that. So there are specialized firms out there for doing forensic analysis from a cybercrime. And so generally speaking, in fact, I don't know of anybody locally that I would know that is considered a forensic specialist. They may be out there, I just don't know them. So anyway, so continuing on with some examples, I think they're worthwhile. Let me see if this works. Yes, there's other forms of cybercrime beside ransomware. This is a real example. Local company, Contra Costa County, called us after this happened. Basically, they ended up getting, one of their emails got hacked. And the adversary, the bad guys, were able to determine where they made their payroll. They were then able to, and so keep in mind, this is a relatively long play. This is not done in a day. This can be done over months, a period of time where they're in the systems and the victim doesn't know it. They were able to identify who the payroll company was. They were able to go and create a domain that was very similar to the domain of the real payroll company, take the real payroll company's emails and drop them into spam so that the client never had, the victim actually never saw the real emails, emulated the payroll company and said basically that now that we're locked in COVID, you've been paying us by paper checks, but now that we're not in the office, we would like for you to pay us by electronic funds transfer. And so they did that actually twice. I think they either a 2-week payroll twice, and they were out about at least $40,000. And they didn't realize they were doing this until the real company finally called them up versus asking or sending emails and saying, where's our money? And that's how they ended up getting hacked. Partially good news is by them going to various authorities, going to the bank. Also, we had recommended to them to contact the IC3 of the FBI, which is the Internet Computer Internet Crimes Complaint Center. They were able to contact them. I don't know who actually did. If it was together, they were able to get at least half of that money back, even though it was electronic funds transfer. But this gives you an idea of the length. And this was a small business, less than 15 people in this business. And so they took that amount of time to make that kind of spear phishing attack on that particular company. Real example, another one is, we've talked about a ransomware attack. Just very briefly, this was another local company. It actually happened to them a second time. The second time, the ransomware was embedded in a resume. This company had actually was looking to hire somebody, and through the normal channels, they had put out information about, hey, if you want to have this job, please send a resume. The resume actually had a malicious payload that dropped ransomware on their particular system. And when that happened, then they called us up and we were able to isolate the ransomware to just a few of the computers before it took over the whole operation. And they did lose some data, but they didn't lose all their data. Okay, all right, moving on. Okay, this is an idea that I want to share with you. And this, I think, is very important. cybersecurity is now a team sport. And what we mean by that is there's really three pillars to cybersecurity. There's people, process, and technology. They all have to be tied together for it to work. Even if one of these pillars are neglected, then the cybersecurity foundation will be weak. So you can have really good technology, but the people aren't trained, or you don't have good process procedures to understand like what your equipment is, or what software you have, or password policies, etc. If you don't have all of these tied together and strong, you're not going to have a good foundation. So it's not just, the key point here is cybersecurity is not just technology. So you can do a lot of things outside of technology measures that need to happen anyway, but you can do that without the technology. And also when it comes to people, people can be in different organizations or different departments to work together. They may be suppliers, they may be IT companies like myself, they may be local authorities, they may be legal, HR, etc. So keep in mind that it is now a team sport. And we should not work in silos. You know, we should be communicating with each other and making sure that everybody understands the nuances of each individual company's needs so that we can form a strong cybersecurity defense. Okay, another idea is the fact, think of kind of the data pie in three sections. There's the data owner or the business that sets the budget for the technology, creates the data, knows the relative importance for the data, and owns the liability and has the most risk if the data is lost or compromised or exposed. Then there's the IT company or segment, which is responsible for implementing the IT technology which has been approved and to maintain the data system. And then something that a lot of times we don't think about, there's also, in addition to information technology, there are information security. And this is where the conversations happen about providing the insights into the risk of which data is more riskier than others, which is more sensitive than the others, and the mitigation strategies. And this really needs to be shared among all the stakeholders, all the people that are associated with this, including IT companies, data owners, etc. So please keep that in mind. Okay. All right. I thought I'd put this in here. This is actually a slide that's been around for quite a while. There's a lot of things that can happen if somebody hacks your email account. I've actually got this as a document that will be available to you at the end of this so that you don't have to write this down. But this gives you an idea of the different areas that a hacked email can affect, which includes the privacy side, spamming. You probably have heard of where all of a sudden emails are coming from you saying that you're stranded abroad somewhere or things like that, or some things on Facebook or Twitter are being sent by you that is not you talking. There's others, it can affect employment issues, financial issues, etc. So keep in mind that a hacked email is very serious. And so you should really protect your email accounts. And a little bit of a side on the bottom. This is actually a suggestion that I heard recently that I think is very good. When you have the option, keep in mind, not best practice, but a better practice, more secure method, if you have the option to use your email or some type of username to sign in, use a unique username, not like, in my case, W. Cantrell. You'd want to use a unique username versus an email when possible. So if your email is indeed hacked, they at least don't have your username in order to get into that account. Because keep in mind that if you use your email, in many cases, they can just go to that particular portal, let's say it's your bank or some other Facebook or something like that, and they can basically, using your email account, they can ask for an email to be sent to reset your password. So for consideration, be very careful with your email account and protect it like it's gold. Okay, Time for poll number 2. Melissa, do you have questions available for poll 2? Here we go. While you're looking at those 2 questions, I'll give you a minute to start doing that.
I'm sorry, who, and then a yes or no?
I'm going to share with you another tip. We were talking about email. It's actually and we also were talking about where a company got hit with electronic funds transfer. This is another tip I heard just recently, is to create a private domain, pay for a private domain, come up with an email or so from that private email that's not public anywhere, and only use that email for wire transfers. This is a better solution to using your normal email that is public facing to also use for wire transfers. And the better way is to have a private domain versus just a separate email under the same domain. Okay, so poll looks like about 3/4 actually are under some type of regulations. Looks like about 2/3 have cyber insurance specific. And it looks like a lot of you have not heard about the Nist Cybersecurity Framework. Okay. All right. Nist stands for the National Institute of Science and Technologies, and we'll be talking about them soon. Okay. Another concept. A lot of business owners, maybe you are at this point, when you start looking at the scope of what needs to be done to try to build your cybersecurity shields around your business, it can become overwhelming. One of the best ways to look at this and to try to narrow down what you need to do is to do a risk assessment of the various data, processes, etc., that could be affected by cyber attack. So on the left-hand side, you have likelihood that's increasing from low to high. This would be so think of it as the likelihood that this data or these systems would be affected by this particular cyber incident. And then along the bottom is the impact. It could be that the impact may be low, that if it is affected or you can't get to, let's say, certain data, this doesn't really make that much difference, or it could be very, very high. And so a better practice is to do this risk assessment on the various parts of your business, the various data, and then really focus on the top right side, and then just take care of the critical items first, then move to the high items, and then depending on your risk tolerance, you continue to move down until you reach a point of where you feel like that you've now got a good balance between what measures you've taken versus the costs in order to protect them. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about hardening cybersecurity defenses. Now we're going to really start getting into some of the meat of this. And this is where I want you to start thinking about takeaways. We're going to give you some time to actually do it in a breakout session to start working on your own business. So, and we're going to be asking you to cover some of this. We're going to be looking at first identifying certain things. So for example, in a few minutes when we go in the breakout session, we're going to want you to identify all the types and locations of your electronic data. And this could be financial records, this could be customer records, it could be text messages on your phone if you use that for business. It could be photographs. It could be something that you're publicizing on Facebook or YouTube or things like that. Then go ahead and rank by importance, sensitivity, confidentiality, etc. And then also, don't forget the quantity of it. Is there a lot of it or just a few things? And then what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to identify where they are and identify if that data is being backed up, and are you testing those backups to make sure those backups are actually working and valid. Okay, so this is something I want you to work on a few moments with your unique company. Also, identify all software assets. This would be your applications. What are you using to run your business? What is your mainline business applications that you're using? And some other ones that maybe, let's say like financial, like QuickBooks or things like that. So identify all those software assets. Then also identify all what's called enterprise assets, which are more physical, like your end user computers, your network devices, your mobile devices, your servers, everything that's being used associated with your business that have access to or can connect to this electronic data that we're talking about before. That can include the Internet of Things. They may not necessarily be interacting with your data, but if they're on the same network, they are connected to that data. Okay. And then you'll want to ask yourself, what of these needs to be monitored? What needs to be protected? What needs to be moved, or what needs to be removed? And that includes data, that includes equipment, that includes software. There may be applications that you are no longer using that are out of date. They need to be taken off of your computers and elsewhere so that they are not a surface where the bad guys can get in. Okay, continuing on. And again, this is all part of pre-planning before there is an incident. So we're thinking now like an incident response. We have to know what we have to know what to protect, okay? So now we want to consider plausible, real-world cybercrime and business interruption scenarios. And start simple. You know, we've talked about ransomware. We talked about business email compromise. What about a disgruntled employee? What can that disgruntled employee do, okay? Then assign an inherent risk level. That, if you remember, we talked about the combination of impact and probability in that chart before. By the way, the inherent risk level is the risk level without any security measures surrounding it. So by itself, stand alone, what is this risk level? And then I recommend a better practice at this point is after you do this risk level analysis to force rank highest to lowest. Okay, this gives you an idea of where to start. Then you want to identify and define the indicators of compromise, or more simply, how do you know you've been hacked? Ransomware is somewhat easy, or a vendor of yours calling up saying, why haven't you paid us when we have paid you? Okay, think of how do you know, or do you know, if you've been compromised? Another thing is, again, part of incident response. Who's going to be part of your incident response team? Is it all going to be internally? And what are their roles? Are you going to be, do you need to include legal assistance? Do you need to include your IT company, which I would typically say yes? Who within your organization, and what are going to be their roles? And you need to form this incident response team so when the incident does happen, everybody has defined roles on what to do in order to respond to this and to try to maintain the business operations as much as possible. Again, the key thing behind this is you want to mitigate the damage, but also you want to have business resiliency so that you can be back up and running as soon as possible and continuing doing the good work that you do for each of your individual businesses. Okay. Also, don't forget to check off the good things. You probably are doing some things very, very well. Just check off the good things, recognize they're there, write it down, and then know and go to the things that need to be done and planned. Okay. All right, so this is a breakout session. This is the time where let's take a break. I believe Melissa is going to be putting you into sessions that are 2 to 3 people, and that I'm going to leave this slide up and would like for you to spend 10 minutes, I think is a good period of time, 10 minutes for you to identify what we were just talking about for your unique business. Is that good, Melissa?
Yeah, sorry, I had to move some people around, so I'm trying to get it figured out. How long would you like?
10 minutes, I think.
Okay, perfect. Let me just make it 10 minutes and I will open it up for everyone.
How many rooms are we going to have?
We have, looks like 5.
Great.
Awesome, Kevin.
Okay. I think I was able to get to most of the breakout rooms. People were having some good discussions. So thank you very much. It's always good to work with other people because they have ideas that you don't necessarily have. Okay, so let's continue on. It is about 2:30, close. We have about a half an hour, so I need to get kind of rolling here. Okay, so now we're talking a little bit about, make sure, let's see. Yep, okay. The more of the protecting and the responding. The purpose of this slide is to talk about how you should have a playbook or a procedure for every particular incident response.
Hey, Wade,
And
we can't see your slides.
uh-oh, let me share the screen again. See it now?
No.
No.
All right, maybe I should hit
There
the,
we go. Now we
maybe I
can.
should hit the share button. Okay, all right, we got it. Okay, so the purpose of this slide is to say that you should have a playbook, and it doesn't have to be really complicated at the beginning, but you should have a playbook or a procedure for each particular incident. The idea behind the revision history is, depending on the size of your organization and the complexity of it, you should consider having a revision history sheet similar to this, of where you have, let's say, here's a series of procedures. The top procedure has the information you need on your incident response team, contact information, roles, etc. Then to the right, you have revision dates, and you want to make sure everybody has the latest revision date. And then as you have different scenarios, you also have various revision dates as you create one, try it, practice, revise it, and as you go forward. So, by the way, this is kind of a thought behind this. If you have this really nice set of procedures and playbooks that you have created for all the different scenarios, ransomware, business email compromise, disgruntled employee, etc., where should it be located? If you get hit with ransomware, it's probably not a good idea to have just an electronic copy. So you probably should consider having this actually printed and having it available to you in case of something like that. So again, develop a procedure, develop a business continuity plan. How do you recover from it? How do you maintain operations? And then practice and revise. So one of the things to go away with that is that, we find this here. One of the things is to remember is that we can't really prevent cyber criminals from attacking our platform, but we can make it hard for them to get to all of our information, okay? And so work at developing that. Okay, continuing on. Some more concepts. Concept of segmenting and separating. Let me share with you a story of Target. This happened, I believe, in 2013. That Target was a victim of a massive data breach. As it turned out, one plausible, I don't think they've ever confirmed that this is actually what happened, but they believe what happened is there were some credentials that they had given to the local HVAC company to get to the wireless network to adjust the settings on the air conditioning. And through those credentials, which got hacked, the bad guys were able to get in through the air conditioning company, which was a vendor. And because there was the network was not segregated, they were able to get to the point of sale records and get to the customers' information like names, credit card information, etc. So the moral of the story is to segment all your assets and networks. We talked about that a little bit in the breakout session, some of them. The networks, the actual information system networks, let's say at your home, should be separate, where the work computers are on one network and then everything else is on another network. Or within your office, it may be a better idea, depending on your office, to have separate networks. For example, in addition to like a guest network and kind of your work network, separate the networks even further to break out some of your key components to your business. So you're separating the data. This is something that we were alluding to before. If you get hit with ransomware, a lot of times the bad guys are going to try to encrypt your backups also. So you need to have a physical gap, potentially. For example, sometimes it's called an air gap, or if one of your methods for backing up your data is an external hard drive, don't leave it plugged in all the time.
Hey, Wade,
Yes.
one more thing to add to those ransomware. Sorry, I'm listening while I'm typing my reports here. Sorry.
Go for it.
You also need to be aware that if your network has ransomware, it's likely the previous week or month they've been exfiltrating your data before what we call nuking your system. So I don't know if you already talked about that, Wade, but typically what these guys will do is exfiltrate all your data, then they'll shoot the ransomware off to kind of hide their tracks or try to hide their tracks and stuff. So, and typically, we find that stuff on the dark web a lot and stuff, but just thought throw that in there real quick while you're talking. Sorry.
Right. And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, that typically the ransomware is like the last thing they do.
Exactly. And they do that because it's kind of like one more way to get a little bit more money out of getting into your network. So, yeah, and we've come across that a couple times where when I've gone to a ransomware incident and I've been able to get the data, you can see where they've exfiltrated out like the social security numbers or credit cards and stuff. And then just kind of like one more little thing, they're like, well, let's see if we can get another like $10,000 with some ransomware too. And then it makes it tough for forensic examiners responding to see that if the files are encrypted. Though there are ways, it just makes it more difficult. So,
okay, very good point. All right, I'm going to move along a little quickly here as time is creeping up on us. Another thing to look at is to practice least privilege. This applies not only to the individuals through access controls, identity, etc., but it also applies to networks and computers. So just what you're doing is you're trying to separate, trying to segment, and practice where if that particular computer, that individual only needs a certain set of information or access, give them no more than what's needed. Okay, poll number 3. Melissa, can you shoot out that last poll, please?
Oh, it's giving me issues, Wade. Hold on.
Okay. All right. Well, we will continue on here. Here we go. Nope. All right. Plan ahead. This is another tip. Have in your mind something similar to a kill switch or your shields up moment, like a Star Trek thing, of where when something does happen, let's say ransomware, what can you take offline? What can you still remove from your normal operation and still have limited functionality? Think about that. I did not see that poll, so is it not coming up?
No, it's not letting me edit it. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. We'll move on. Okay. All right. Okay. So questions. Make sure you, again, we've talked about this, know what your network environment looks like at your workers' homes and separate out the networks and reduce the attack surface. Okay, let's talk about the National Institute of Science and Technology Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF. This was created in 2013 by then President Obama. It was continued to be modified. Keep in mind that this is a framework. It is something that is a guideline that is used to kind of check your current cybersecurity systems. It is based on existing standards. So it's not something that you necessarily use, or I'm sorry, something that you do use, but you don't do. It's not like a checklist that you go through. It's more of a way to check, as far as checking what you do. It's not something that you do. It's more of you use it to check to see if there's certain systems in place. Okay. And just keep in mind that it is always evolving, so it does change. So this is the analogy that I want to share with you when it comes to protecting your environment, your computing, your networking environment. Think of a house. So in your house, what do you have that you want to protect? There are many things. First and foremost, probably your family. You have jewelry, and you have cash under the mattress, and you have electronics, and you have tax records, and you have financial information. And because we're near wine country, you have a wine cellar, and you have family photos, and you have art. So there's many things in your home, just like in your workplace, that you want to protect. And the question is how do you protect them? Well, there's multiple levels of protection. You have doors and windows, you have locks, and then there's the local police that you can call. There's insurance. There is, depending on your batting average in Little League, you may have a baseball bat. There is the local news that you're reading. There is a fence. You have a dog and possibly yard signs. Then you have an alarm system. The alarm system may have a motion sensor, maybe have a doorbell camera. Then you're reading more about the crime statistics, and let's say they're not looking too good, so you end up forming a neighborhood watch. So you have all of these things to help protect your home. This is similar to the 5 core functions of the cybersecurity framework: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Each column has their own function. Under each function, you have certain things that you can do. This is very similar to the Nist cybersecurity framework. So the Nist cybersecurity framework looks like this. The key thing that I want you to take away, by the way, there'll be a document that's a deliverable, so you don't have to be writing all this down. The key thing I want you to take away is the fact that on the left-hand column, the layers of security, there are administrative functions, there are technical functions, and there are physical. I really don't concern myself much with the physical side. We're primarily in the technical area, but we also help on the administrative side. Okay, so the key thing is that to have a thorough cybersecurity structure is that you should consider all these different core functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, and also the 3 different layers. Okay. All right, so again, these are the 5 core functions of the Nist cybersecurity framework. Another thing to consider is more on the technical side. There are many different ways, kind of like all the different things you can do to protect your home. There are many different ways you can protect your business from a cyber attack. Beginning with some very basic ones like passwords. Passwords should be unique. Passwords should not be common. So any especially important sensitive website should have a totally separate password that's not easily guessable, either by knowing anything about you or by some dictionary lookup. Okay. Another thing, staying kind of on the right-hand column, some of the groups talked about this. Multi-factor authentication is just basic. Okay, nowadays it should be used everywhere possible. And also, I think very important is that in the top left, you should do a security assessment. Preferably, better practice would be to have an outside entity do that for you. So there's a number of different things here that are of different expense, different time consuming. And I recognize that everything that is here, any dollar spent or any minute spent on these is a dollar not going toward your marketing or customer service or to the bottom line. And the same thing with time, it's not being used. But it's something that you and your unique business needs to decide whether it is something that is useful or essential. Also, it is becoming, in my opinion, more and more important to have cyber insurance. to consider having that, which is a separate segment of a policy or a separate policy for your business. Okay, so for the sake of time, we will move on. So the Nist framework is like the granddaddy. Everybody really kind of references that. There is another control system out there that is simpler. It is by the Center of Internet Security, which is an independent organization based in the US, but comprised of global IT professionals. And their whole idea is to try to make running our businesses and our lives more secure on the internet. It is comprehensive, though. It's simpler than the cybersecurity framework by Nist, but you still have 153 safeguards. You have 3 implementation groups. And the key thing, though, is that the implementation groups are broken down in that the basic function is the IG1, which is the basic cyber hygiene. And that's where everybody should start. And again, just like with the Nist framework, it evolves with cybercrime. And again, like the Nist, it is not about the list. Okay, so here is the 18 control sections for this, which again can be overwhelming. Okay, but let me just share with you a couple of these. This is kind of what it looks like. This is control number 1. And if you look at the top, it is under blue, it says it's the inventory control of enterprise assets. This is what we were doing today. So you have the title, you have the security function on the leftmost column, which is identify. You have the title of it, you have the description, and then on the far right, you have IG1, IG2, IG3. The most basic things to look at are the IG1s, the ones that have the X's there. So these would be what you should look at first. Again, this is going to be a deliverable that we provide you. There's going to be a document on this, and also there's going to be an Excel spreadsheet that allows you to do your own self-evaluation. I haven't personally done it. This company put it together. They say you can do an evaluation of all the 153 areas within 2 hours. So this is so what the recommendation would be is to start on this particular control number 1 and just look at the first 2, the ones that I have that have not been faded out. The other ones can be done later. The first ones just do the basic. Similarly, there is the control number 3, which is talking about data protection. We were also talking about that today. This, because of the space on the slide, I was only able to put 6 in, which are the 6 that the IG1 recommends. And these, again, you have on the left-hand column, you have 2 of them that are identify, function, core function, then you have the protect, and you can go through and determine where you stand with that, establish and maintain your data management process and address the sensitivity data, etc. And so this is a plan for you to go through and look at where you stand right now. And from that, looking at your risk assessment can determine where to go next. Okay. All right. We are done with the formal presentation. Now is a great time for you to ask questions and for us to basically wrap up. Darren, if you're available, if you can, be great if you could be available to answer questions. Melissa,
Yeah,
how do you want the questions to be asked? How do you, I'm going to leave it up to you to call up people or read or.
Yeah, if everyone doesn't mind, if you have a question, raise your hand, and that's the easiest way for me to see it pop up on the screen, and then I'll call on you.
I'm going to stop my share so I can see everybody. Okay. Any questions? I'm not that thorough.
Hey, I have a question, Wade. It's from the breakout room, and I don't. So, like, if I take my computer from work and I take it home and I log into my computer from home, but I'm using my home internet. So I've now crossed the stream to breach my computer, right? For someone could maybe access if I had.
You've extended the path essentially to, and extended the surface area now to.
Is the way not to do that is just to not log on my home on my home, or is there something I should install at my house? You know?
Well, one of the things is that many people don't realize that you have multiple ways to segment your home network. You can segment them into different networks. So people are familiar with a guest network, and
Right, that's what we have here too.
But you can segment it even more than that, where only your work computer is connected to that particular network, and that'll minimize it.
All right, so I should look into that, because then I'm not connecting my TV and my microwave and all the other.
Right. And there's other things that you can do.
Connects now,
Yeah, there's other things that you can do too, but that's definitely a good first step.
Is that a VPN that you're talking about, Wade, or is it something that you set up with a router?
That's set up with the router, with the home router. And the VPN, by the way, is also a very good way to go, because that is protecting the path from your home to your office. Okay. So you have the path from the computer to the router, then you have your home router, then you have the path from your home router to your office. So the VPN is really connecting or protecting the path from, including the path to the work office.
Now, my second question is the shield or force field. I'm not a Trekkie or nothing, but if we get, let's just say we notice somebody's working in our computer, is one of our things to just unplug it?
That would be definitely a possible scenario. You would need to kind of walk through that and say, what happens if we do that?
Meaning you're going to lose the stuff you're working on?
Right. Or do you have, or is that the only computer that can access certain things, and then all of a sudden you now don't have access to certain things?
Could you could you unplug your internet cable, your Cat5?
Sure.
Yeah, so that would be an option instead of turning off your computer.
That may be kind of, that's certainly something to do until you evaluate what's going on and then decide what to start plugging back in one by one. Yes. But again, all of these things are, I'm saying yes to this without really going through kind of the thorough analysis. It's something that you should consider as a possibility, but you should do the kind of the what if analysis. What if this happens and we do this? Now what's left? What's the next step? Also, who do we call? Who do we get involved? Yeah. Okay.
Derek?
Yeah. In regard to 2 things. One, the cyber insurance put out a thing recently that every 19 seconds, a small business is being hacked. So in our hour and a half meeting, almost 290 businesses will have been hacked. In regards to connecting at home, Wade, so if you use a VPN and you're accessing another network, everything you're doing on that network theoretically is secure as the hardware and software that you have out there. But then if you're opening up your Outlook on your local laptop, you're still opening that door up, correct? If you're not segmenting your personal network.
If I understand your question, the answer is correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions for Darren, the detective? This is a great opportunity to ask him on things that either he's seen or experienced, because he's a very busy guy.
So if we get hacked, which is, Darren mentions the PD comes, or his group, but then he also mentions that a lot of times people will use the private to take it over from there. What's the benefit either way, or should we just stay with the first folks on the scene? And I know the answer is probably it's our choice, but what are the pros and cons?
I could touch on that, Wade, if you want.
Please.
So for law enforcement, we share a lot of data and stuff, right, with the feds and everyone else. Typically, the pros of having us come out there is really, it could allocate you some extra time to do like notifications, let's say. It gives us a chance to take your case and see if it's familiar with another case that the same hacker did, like say in the same city or something, or in another state, let's say. It's really just a way to help us try to identify and, go after these actors. Usually they're in Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, China, stuff like that. Nigeria is a big one right now. India is a big one. So for the private sector, having like say Wade or some similar company to his come out, let's say, by having them come out, they can take everything from start to finish, whereas we're just going to come out and we're going to get just the data we need to see if we can work up a case on it, but we're not going to give you any advice because of liability reasons. We're not going to give you, we can give you maybe like suggestions of where you should go from there, like we can't tell you to get a lawyer. We can't tell you to do anything like that. But Wade or another company like Wade's could give you advice, and knowing that, you're probably not going to sue them, but for the PD's sake, and we have to be careful to, CYA when it comes to that stuff. So in my personal opinion on this would be, it's good to have us there to at least get some data, or at least have, if you have, say, like an incident response firm come out from start to finish without contacting law enforcement, you could ask them if they want to share data with us or not. But in the end, what I've seen a lot happen is just really people hire the private firms because it's just easier to have one firm do it from start to finish, and you'll get more robust advice as to what to do. And what your procedure should be like for notifications and stuff. Because I think Wade touched on, there are certain notification issues if it turns out to be like PII was stolen and stuff like that. So, it's really, I guess it's really not a big benefit to having us out there, except that it does help us to try to track down these hackers. Because I've worked on cases where sometimes we've been able to find out where these guys are at, especially with the ransomware ones. It just really depends. So there's really no right or wrong answer for that.
In the case of like when the company has lost money through like a business email compromise, getting you involved, does that increase the chance of them maybe getting some of the money back through either what you guys do or through your connections? Or
yeah, it really depends upon if you have, say, cyber insurance or what they require. They may require a police report, at least something documenting it. But if, I've worked cases where they've, had like up to 700,000, and, I've worked hacking cases where it's been a couple $1 million stolen and stuff. And the benefit to you is if we do find that, then, because we can do stuff that the private sector cannot. We have search warrant power, we have subpoena power. And typically, sometimes we can get the money back, most often not, but for the most part, sometimes we can. And if we do, I'll tell you right now, the feds probably won't take a case unless it's going to be over a certain dollar amount, which is why small businesses are targeted so much, because they know that the feds aren't going to worry about a small business who lost like $50,000 or $10,000. But now if you're a big company who's lost a couple million, the feds will get involved on that because it's a big case, and they'll try to do their best, and they'll assign resources like myself and others to try to find it. So I think it really depends upon each situation if it's beneficial to have us there or not. For a small business, like here in Concord, it's rare that a PD has somebody like myself. I'm not talking myself up. I'm just saying it's rare to have somebody who's in cybersecurity at a PD that can do that stuff. It doesn't hurt to report it and then see if we could at least help give you some resources on where to go from there.
To add what you just said is that the IC3, which is the FBI's division where you would report this, I did the math. In 2020, they averaged over 2,100 complaints a day of what they were getting. and that's just US FBI. And they're probably getting a small fraction of the total number of cases that's going on. The other thing I wanted to share, which from a cyber insurance standpoint, is that if you do get cyber insurance or insurance, and Derek, you may want to add up to this, in many cases within that policy, there are reporting guidelines of if you get hacked, how quickly or you should respond to them, because they have procedures that they may want you to follow before they will reimburse you. Correct, Derek?
Correct. And there's a big difference between endorsements that are on the standard small business insurance policy and a standalone, full, robust cyber policy. And these carriers have in their back pocket the various forensic people that would want to be hired to help do restoration and so on and so forth. So
again, your local IT guy, like myself, we may be able to do a lot, but we are not the forensic specialist. And the insurance, cyber insurance company may have that team or those people, or like Darren mentioned, there are certain entities that can do that for you also.
Sorry, I muted myself. I didn't realize it. And so for some local small companies, if I have the time, if I get the data, sometimes I'll go through it myself because I do digital forensics as well. And I'll try to see, was there any data exfiltrated or not? But with all, because it's no secret that we're so short on officers here in Concord and just everywhere in the world, it's tough to be able to do that as much. So typically when I respond out to something where, it's a company in Concord, if they do call us for help, let's say I am working, I'll try to do my best to help out as much as I can. But in the end, I cannot help you get your network or system back online, with backups and stuff like that. It's not in we don't have the time, unfortunately, or the job title, I guess you would say, to do that. But that's where you have somebody come in like, Wade or a cybersecurity firm who could help you get everything back and restored and, back in order. So we have to be careful with our time, because in the end, we can't disperse resources for something where there's likely not going to be a resolution in the end. And that's something I can pretty much tell by just talking to people on the phone and stuff, like how far in is it? Or I've done enough of these where I could be like, it sounds like, the feds probably won't take that, but if you want help on this, I can give you some advice or some suggestions, I should say. But it's really, each situation is going to be different. So.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's about time for Respect Everybody. We'll go ahead and cut this off very quickly. Melissa, we do have a survey that would love for you to fill out, give us feedback on what we can do better next time. Melissa, how are you planning on sending it out to these folks?
So I will send the contact list like we do for every other event, and I'll include the survey and a couple of the other resources that Wade went through. So if you don't mind, just reply back to the email to me and I'll get those survey results back over to Wade, if you don't mind.
Perfect. Anything else? Well, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Darren, for attending. Melissa, you did a great job as always.
Thank you. Thank you, Wade.
My phone is available. Give me a call if you have any questions.